Hello and welcome back to Rule the Waves 3, this time playing as Japan, running from 1890 until 1970, not to 1990 like my previous France run did. We are playing on a slightly modified game, doing super large plus plus, which is super large plus 25%. That's about at the limit of what the game engine can handle, in my opinion. So let's jump in. This playthrough will also feature some PowerPoint presentations at key moments, using them to highlight my thought processes, my design goals and priorities, my analysis of the current and future state of the game, that sort of thing. So, the settings for this game, we already went through the time frame. It's 1890 to 1970. We are running on 100% technology, so by the time we get to the 60s, most of the text will be fully researched. And by the time we reach 1970, that is definitely the case, and all the jet fighters and all of the missiles and all of that, it's going to be fully mature, so it feels right to end the game at the sort of normal end point. And we already did a 1990 run in the France playthrough, and it got a little bit samey, yeah. So what is super large plus plus? I briefly touched upon it. It is a quick save game edit where you change the size setting from 8 to 10. So medium is, I think, 4, so 8 is twice. Super large is normally twice as large as medium, but we are adding 25% on top of that. So expect to see pretty big fleets. But we're Japan, so our starting fleet is teeny tiny. This does not actually affect the starting fleet. The starting fleet is generated as it would be for super large. So you will probably recognize that if you've played Japan on super large before. But the budget starting and future will be 25% bigger. This is not the biggest game I've ever played. I have played several size 10 games and it's fine and fun. At size 12, I played a France game for quite a few years on size 12, and it got there's a lot of bookkeeping, and you're sort of I got bored of that. Also, the game start engine, it started to struggle with mission speeds. Big fleet battles at size 12, very laggy. I'm running with the harsh peace deals again, and yeah, wars are not really rewarding unless you do those quick victorious wars. Harsh peace deals gives me some incentive to fight a few extra wars, if that makes sense to you. So that is why I almost always play with harsh peace deals. I know it skews the game somewhat in my favor, but I'm doing this for my own personal, I almost said gratification, but for fun. So this makes the game more fun for me. We are doing 100% tech because we already did 80% in the previous playthrough. And no variation this time, because I never play with no variation. I want to see how that pans out, basically. Standard aircraft development. Big air bases. I think that's fitting for any super large or larger game. So, already touched upon the mods I'm using. Super large is a simple save game edit. I've also gotten the Wood Tone National Decks by JV Smith 26 from the forums. Just a copy paste job into the preferences file, but it makes all the decks of the ships look pretty good. I have also modified the class names to include type and design here for the starting legacy ships. If you watched my France playthrough, you know why I do this. I sort on last name, and it drives me insane when I cannot do this. So yeah, it's a very minor edit. Takes a few seconds, and then I'm set. Campaign goals. What are we out to accomplish? To rule the world, of course. More specifically, we are gonna control the Indo-Pacific region because we're Japan, so it makes sense. And if we can, we will ultimately seize Egypt and Panama to sort of lock off this region from everyone else, basically. Our starting ploy is to pick a fight with China and grab Shanghai because of limited invasion ranges. That's, I think, our best starting options. Then we can spread like a little Japanese cancer along the coast there. Then we will start picking fights with low to mid-tier opponents. Well, the mid-tiers once we grow stronger. And Spain and Germany are initially pretty weak and have a presence in the Pacific, so there is some potential for seizing some colonies. But because invasion ranges are so low and because we want reparations, not territories, it's not a super good proposition in the very early game. France and Russia, obviously. Great Britain has a lot of colonies, but they are out of reach for now. And sort of a vague possible end game. If things really go in our favor, we could fight the US in the Caribbean in like the 50s or something. But we'll see. I had that vague plan with the France game as well, and it never happened. So just have to see how the game develops. And speaking of the game developing, I have some goals for this game or this playthrough. It's going to be slower paced than my other YouTube games, which is basically just me playing the game and posting it online. I will spend a lot more time doing analysis of the situation, start of year reviews, decade reviews, pre-post battle reviews, pre-post war reviews, that sort of thing. And I will also keep up the commentary on my choices, both in and out of battle. I won't talk 100% of the time, but I will share more. We will also talk about game mechanics where applicable, as far as I know these game mechanics. They're pretty opaque sometimes. But we'll dive into subs, mines, aircraft. But we will only do those things once those mechanics become relevant. We can talk about mines and mine sweepings once that's a thing in the game. I don't want to front load the playthrough with all sorts of crap before we actually get going. There is also some role playing on my part. I will try to go for prestige choices. But I need to manage tensions and be realistic about money. So it's money is more important to a fleet than glory. I will also try to make designs and fleet compositions somewhat realistic for nation and period, but that doesn't mean I will build a lot of weird Japanese ships that are objectively bad in the context of the game. We will try to combine those two. Don't game the system to the max, but make stuff that's reasonable given my understanding of what works and doesn't work in the game. You can follow the campaign obviously by watching these YouTube videos, but I'll also prepare the folder. There will also be a link in the description, of course, because you can't click this link in the video, where you can find these presentations, ship design templates if you want to try some of them out. And I will also add some save game files at different points in the playthrough. I'll start by adding the start 1890 file and the modified file if you want to do that as well with the size 10 and class name tweaks. You want to get in touch, I guess I'm on the forum, but not very often. But I'm on the Discord, so you can join there and we can have a chat if you want to. And finally, a special thanks to Dicky on RVT War Games, I think it was. When I started playing Ruler Waves 2 way back, his video stood out as very insightful, and also just it's pleasant to watch Dicky. And he does this PowerPoint thing and dives deep into the analysis part of the game and also his thought processes and that sort. So you can say that this playthrough is dedicated or inspired by Dicky. And also a special thanks to everyone on the Discord that have provided so many answers to my questions over the years. And maybe I shouldn't. I need to mention one in particular, and that is Alikan or Alekan or whatever, whose insights are pretty unique. He's spent a lot of time looking under the hood, so to speak, and he also has this way where he can really get to the substance of things and do some really lean, effective builds. So you can learn a lot from that guy. So now you know. That's the way the PowerPoint format is going to be going forward. I hope you enjoyed it. We will now jump into the game and see what actual setup is like, what they have given us in terms of legacy fleet and all that. But first we can talk a little bit about what's appealing about Japan and what's not so appealing. For the first time in ages, I have decided not to play in Europe, and specifically France. I need to shake my France addiction. France is so great because it's smack in the middle of everything. It has a home area in both Northern Europe and the Med, so sort of 90% of what actually happens in the game happens in your home area, and you're going to be in conflicts and wars and in the middle, smack in the middle of things. And it's a strong nation, I think. Not the strongest, so you're not the underdog, I would say, but you're definitely not the top dog, so you have to work for it. But that makes it all the more interesting. So Japan is very different. Japan is in its own corner in Northeast Asia, on the other side of the world, basically, both from the Americas, the US, and Europe, Mediterranean. So what's the appeal here? Well, the appeal is that you can sit alone in your corner and no one will bother you much if you want to do that approach, or you can go out into the world and pick fights and sort of conquer territory and very visually see that your empire is expanding. There is also definitely an underdog kind of vibe initially, even though you only have two real opponents in your home sector, so to speak. China and Russia, both weak, not initially, then eventually. But it's there is a lot of potential for both peace and war, I would say. You can really get the feeling of starting small, growing by just expanding your industries, which Japan is very good at. It grows exceptionally fast from a weak start and then just keeps growing faster than almost anyone else for the entirety of the game. So only the US can really match you for or exceed you for resources. And that's before you take war reparations on next territories. So, and of course, in terms of ship design and that sort of thing, there's a lot of real world inspiration. You can see a pretty cool battleship in the background there, for example. So I think Japan is, if I had to rank France versus Japan, I would say France is way more interesting overall. But Japan definitely has a special appeal that makes it not my favorite nation, one that I would sort of be willing to play in every game. I could play France in every game, basically. Never do anything else and be happy with it because it's so incredibly good and interesting. But from time to time, you just have to go back to Japan to live out your Pan-Pacific empire fantasy. So here we are. This is the starting legacy fleet. We're skipping the setup part of the game that's laid out in the presentation, so there's no point duplicating it. I did several starts here before I got something that I felt I could live with. If you're hardcore, you will of course just take whatever the game gives you and go with that. But I typically can't handle too many different classes. I don't care what the classes are, what the stats are, because these legacy ships are pretty terrible anyway. But this was the first that actually gave me a minimum number of classes. So 1 battleship, 1 heavy cruiser, only 2 light cruisers. This is not unique. 1 battleship class is standard. 1 to 2 heavy cruiser classes, pretty standard. But usually you will get multiple variants of the same basically light cruiser. So you can have 3, 4, I think I've seen 5, even 6 different types of light cruiser. I also got way more colonial gunboats than I could ever hope for or wish. Way too many, 8 in total, and Japan starts with no colonial possessions, so these are, at least initially, kind of wasteful, but I guess we can find uses for them later once the empire expands. And we have a total of 3 ships under construction as well. So that's a very quick look at things. And yeah, you can see that the monthly yearly and monthly budget on size 10 is exactly 25% bigger than it would be on super large. So this is after I have edited the file. But generated starting fleet, that is basically super large, not super large plus plus. I have no way of making the game do that generation. Then you would have to go in and sort of tweak the base starting resources of every nation, and that's too much work. And besides, now everyone, including the AI, can enjoy having a bit of an extra lenient build budget early on. And then we cut back to PowerPoint. So, start of game, the 1890 analysis. And let's look at our legacy fleet compared to the legacy fleet of other nations, peers and global naval powers alike. And we basically have the absolute smallest fleet of every nation in the game. We start with 71,300 tons total. And you can see that the US, which also starts with a microscopic budget, still has a bigger fleet than us. And China has a way bigger fleet than us. China is ahead, and Germany, also normally considered a tiny starting nation, is also ahead by a good margin. And of course, the top dog is Spain, also 106,000. That's 50% bigger than our fleet, pretty exactly. And then Italy, of course, and France, Russia is comparable, and Great Britain, yeah. Yeah. The fleet composition is, well, similar. I have only one battleship. That might seem strange, but if you generate 10 starts with Japan, quite a few of those will only give you one B. The others will give you two Bs in one class. I never think I've seen more than two Bs starting like this on super large for Japan. Then you get, in this case, 4 heavy cruisers. Sometimes you get them in one class. Slightly more often you get them as 2 classes. I also think I've seen 3 classes. I'm not sure about that. Not important. But like I said previously, you usually get way more than 2 different light cruiser classes. So that was very appealing for me. I got way more auxiliary ships, and all of them colonial in this. Normally you get the 5-ish colonial corvettes, or you might have some colonial corvettes and a few sort of regular gunboats in the 900 to 1200 ton category, or a mix. So again, this was fairly appealing. But again, it's not super important. There are, of course, no planes or subs or destroyers yet. No. Sad starting fleet, but hopefully we have potential. And we can see that we have more potential than China and Spain, because we have a significantly bigger or larger budget than they do. And there is also a very big difference in terms of growth here. Both Spain and China has a penalty for growth early on. We have a massive boost, same with the US. They have a massive boost for the entire game, but Japan can maybe match the US in the 1890 to 1980 range. Well, not quite match, but not too far behind. Germany will also expand pretty quick, but not as quick as we will. But they start from a slightly better position. But eventually we will eclipse them. So this is our single battleship. It's the Fuso. It's 6,400 tons. I would call it an ironclad. It's not a pre-dreadnought, really. Not with those 2 single turrets and some casemates and some microscopic guns. It is 15 knots, which is pretty slow even for 1890s battleships. You can get them down to 14 knots if you're unlucky. But there are also people with 16 knot battleships, so yeah, we're not fast. It's poorly armored, about 7.5 inches on the belt, which is nothing. 2 bad 9-inch guns, 6 bad 8-inch guns, and some pea shooters. No torpedoes. There's cramped accommodations. It's not hopeless. We can refit it, give it a 3-month refit to at least bring its firepower to somewhat acceptable levels. And if we had 2 of them, that would make a bit more sense. You could also bulge it, of course, for even more firepower, but that would bring the speed down to 13, and once the engine starts to rot, it will drop all the way down to 11 knots. That's sort of a coastal, or not even a coastal monitor, it's sort of a monitor you stick in your port and never move. But it has a blockade value that is pretty decent, so for that reason alone, it's worth keeping around. Plus, the game protests and takes away some of your prestige if you try to scrap it before building a couple of divisions of proper battleships. So we will keep for now. Next up is this cruiser class. It's 6,400 tons. I would call it a big-ish protected cruiser. And it even has the protected cruiser armor scheme, not flat deck on top of belt. It's 20 knots, which is decent. Sometimes you get 19 knot starting cruisers. That's not cool. Pretty weak armor. Too much deck, of course, but then again, all the starting cruisers do. Armament is, I would say, okay for a starting build, and we can improve that even further. Not 8-inch guns, but the rest. It is definitely a candidate for bulging, but if we bulge it right away, then we suddenly do not have a cruiser with decent speed, we have a cruiser with slow speed. So, but it's also possible to give it a 3-month refit to improve its firepower, and then later, once the engines start to rot out, then we can just bulge it because it's not keeping pace anyway. And it can still catch and destroy some old battleships. So something we can consider. We will keep those two, of course. We'll basically keep all the ships. We are not in a position to start scrapping anything yet. So we will keep those two, and we will finish building the two that are in the queue. We are about a year out. Then we have 6 built and 1 building, and this is the class that I think I like the most, because it's for a starting light cruiser. Starting light cruisers fall into 2 categories: the bigger ones that are in this tonnage range, 5,400, and the small ones that are in the 3,500 range. This is, of course, a protected cruiser. 21 knot, again, decent. I didn't get any of those. You can sometimes get starting ships that are either 1 knot slower or 1 knot faster. I didn't get any this time, so no faster ships. This would have been excellent to have as a class 7 starting ships with speed 22. That would have been awesome. Armor is overall very weak, and it has an excessive deck thickness. Main deck, not deck extended, of course. The 10-inch, 6-inch guns, that's good. The 2-inch guns are not. Some torpedoes. Yeah. It can definitely be tweaked to have better firepower. To retain the 6 inches and add more secondary and tertiaries of decent caliber, that requires bulging, which, to be fair, could be a way forward, but then you don't have a 21 knot ship anymore. Then you are down to 19, which will eventually drop to 17, which is fine, but for the initial years, I think I prefer to have a bit of speed. I looked at some of the AI ships, and China has some ships that are pretty slow, but you don't know if those will show up in battle or not. More likely not. And the AI likes to run away if it doesn't feel it can take you down. So think it's. I'm sure there are many that will disagree with me and say that you should bulge immediately, but I kind of like being able to run the AI down. And torpedoes are not really a huge threat. So if I lose some of the legacy ships, it's usually through fire and not through flooding. Flooding is fairly rare, actually. But of course, some belt hits at the waterline could flood you. So, pros and cons. But definitely a candidate for bulging, but I think that will be later. If we add in the single cruiser of light cruiser of the other division, we can make 2 4-ship divisions and put them into reserve. And this is the final light cruiser. It's not super small, but it is definitely slightly weaker. It's a 5-inch ship instead of a 6-inch ship. Otherwise, fairly similar, in fact. And this too can be upgraded with or without bulging. Now, of course, if I bulge the others, this will get bulged. But it's not a horrible ship. And yeah, colonial gunboats basically counting as plus 25% on foreign stations. So between them, 18,750 effective tons on foreign stations. But I have 0 foreign station requirements as of start game. You have Hokkaido, but that's a native territory, so does not need policing like that. These can later be refitted to be minesweepers and have some anti-sub warfare stats as well. They are worth keeping around for a very long time because even when old, their running costs are very low, I would say. And by obsolete, I do not mean obsolescent as in that little O. I mean when their hulls get really old and rotten, and you have to pay extra upkeep. But it's extra upkeep of almost nothing, so it's not a problem. Cheaper to just keep them than to build something new. So if you build modern colonial gunboats, colonial cruisers, that you do that because you have extra money and because you want to. There is a 2 hidden behind my head here. It also says 2 here, so problem. They will of course be mothballed for now, but in the future they can come out to play. So those are my ships, but what about my competitors? Well, my primary peer competitor, scraping the bottle off the barrel here, that's China. China has 2 pretty shitty ironclads, but I guess we have to say that they are indeed better than my single battleships. So, yeah. But they're also building a big one in France, 12,600 tons. That's definitely crushing it. They have 5 very slow heavy cruisers with probably minus 2 7-inch guns. But they also have 3 that are probably the same as mine. So 5 bad, 3 okay, and 1 big one building in the US. So it's not an auto kill or anything. The light cruisers, however, those are not too impressive. Light cruisers at 20 knots with a mixture of guns and classes and some gunboats, including 2 single 10-inch gunners. Coastal monitor is 12 knots and a pair with 8 One with 8-inch guns, the rest with 6-inch guns. So I think they can be comfortably fought once I have refitted my legacy fleet, but you never know how long it takes to get into a war with China. It could happen in the first year, it could happen in 1893. Someone else could beat China to it. So Germany, I would say, is a peer competitor as well. We mentioned that they have some bad ironclads, worse than mine, probably short-ranged and cramped, not gonna do well traveling around Africa to Asia. 3 decent heavy cruisers, lots of light cruisers, but some of them very, very small. And some AEs. There should be a capital E there, but PowerPoint likes to make it small again. I think they can be fought with my refitted legacy fleet, but it requires them to come to Asia to fight us. And we cannot invade any of their possessions, so it's not ideal in any way. Yeah. Spain, definitely fightable in a few years. Russia, we need some time to build up. 10 years or more, I would say, is ideal. Same with France. We can definitely take on France eventually, but not right away. Italy, US, we're not in a position to fight them because we don't have overlapping fields of interest. And, well, Great Britain, we don't really want a war with Great Britain. But we are natural friends, so... and we need to keep them happy to build ships at their docks until we can expand our docks a bit. So, apart from our fleet, what assets do we possess? Well, we have 2 4-inch and 4 6-inch batteries in Japan. That is technically a waste of upkeep. First of all, you don't get any benefit really from having more than 5 batteries in any area. And also your home area cannot be invaded and there will be no rebellions there. So actually you could just scrap them in many ways. But they do, I guess, provide some mines and minor gunnery benefits if some enemy ship stumbles close. But keeping them is mostly a role-playing issue. And upkeep cost of batteries is very low once they're built, so it's not going to materially affect my playthrough. So we're gonna keep them. We have Hokkaido, this little island up in the north there. This one. It's part of Japan basically, but it can be invaded and taken away. It's worth 8 colony points, if I can call it that. The value is 8 points. It has no fortification, so that is something that we want to remedy. It cannot rebel against us, but it can definitely be invaded. So it well, basically it can be invaded by Russia. It'll be many years before anyone else can invade it. So we start with a dock size of 6,000. That is, of course, hilariously bad. We cannot even build a maximum size 8,000 ton destroyers at home. So this needs expanding. And there is one more thing. Japan starts with a trait undeveloped shipbuilding industry. This means that stuff take 10% longer to build, and they don't cost more, but they just take more months to build. So in a way you can have more ships building at the same time because their monthly costs will be lower. But they are also prone to having unexpected faults, like not reaching their design speed. But like we saw in my France playthrough, that happens a lot with me, even when I don't have this trait. Half my destroyer classes, and I had many destroyer classes, were actually 1 knot slow. And I think I had one event, had a carrier that was slow. Well, not important. This trait can be removed, but you have to build a lot locally for it to happen. Exactly how much I do not know, but I have played Japan previously and become really frustrated when the trait doesn't disappear, but it will eventually. Yeah. Next up, we have research, which by default is set to 8%, but can go up to 12. We are not a rich nation, so we should basically set our research budget to 12 to sort of eke out the maximum points that we can. However, we are not so rich as to be able to do that, I think, at the moment, but we will be in a while. But when we become richer, there is less need for us to go up to 12% because 11-12% so-called diminishing returns. I don't know, I haven't done the maths, but you get less extra research points for those percent than you do up to 10. And there isn't all that much to research yet. There are a few key technologies that needs researching, especially Harvey armor. And in a few years, we need turrets, and we need ship design, and we need better guns. But those things are a few years off, so I think I will just start it like this and focus on building up a decent sort of starting navy, not legacy, but yeah, my first batch of self-designed and built ships. So this is definitely something that will change later on. We will have ship design and turrets and guns all on high. And more research areas will also appear. You can see torpedoes, nowhere to be seen. Naval Academy, nowhere to be seen. For the future, we need to think about light forces and torpedo warfare, where we have an advantage, and aircraft stuff also advantage, and Japan is unique in having a disadvantage in radar and electronics, but that is a problem for the future, and when that happens, we have the ability to sort of set most other things to low or medium and radar to max, and we can get radars just fine. And we can steal, beg, borrow, and steal. Yeah. For doctrines, night fighting is the only doctrine that may be worth it, but I never use it anyway because 20% is just too much. But for Japan, it's just around, just under 12% increase, so 10% and change extra. And the game loves to throw night battles at you, so having a bit of extra spotting range can be super useful. How long you keep doing this? It's up to you. You plan to keep fighting often, you might want to keep it on all the time. It's so cheap. Or you can switch it on and off. But when war is starting to loom, it takes a year to train up, so it can be a little bit difficult. You definitely don't want to use it in the radar age, I think. Then it's wasteful. Damage control, once that unlocks, once you have radar, once you're not doing night fighting, then you might even consider actually doing damage control. I don't think I would do it. Damage control text and crew quality is more important, but I guess it's viable. I also added numbers for sort of gunnery. You do gunnery night fighting, that's, or gunnery damage control, that's 29% instead of 50. If you do the classic torpedo plus night fighting, that's 23 instead of 40. So if you think you can afford night fighting on other nations, then you can actually maybe for night fighting and torpedo warfare, but I don't find it that useful. So we will definitely be picking up night fighting at some point, also in character for Japan. Did a lot of night fighting training and developed quite a bit of specialized gear and doctrine for it. So eventually when the Naval Academy unlocks, we will do it. It's somewhat helpful, although it does cost money. But we cannot go around trying to be a leading naval power and not have a naval academy. Where do we get our officers? Do we just pull them out of their shack out in the countryside and just tell them you're the captain now? Yeah. The rest of the doctrine stuff is completely irrelevant at the moment, so we'll talk about that later. Ammunition. You can play the game for hundreds of hours without ever touching this. I certainly did that, and even now I had to seek sort of counsel on the Discord and draw upon many hours of game experience, and I would say the benefits of tweaking this is pretty minimal. But things to consider is 2 and 3 inch guns. They are, as indicated by the table, always high explosive rounds. They have no armor penetration, no matter what, so that's not relevant at all. Dual purpose guns, not relevant now, but relevant later, are always firing only high explosive. But only secondary and tertiary batteries, not main batteries. So if you have destroyers with main battery dual purpose, for example, or even light cruisers for some reason with dual purpose main battery, then it will take your ammo loadouts into consideration. The equation here is fairly simple, really. Are you shooting at stuff that you need to penetrate? If yes, then go armor penetration. And, well, everything has armor. Except destroyers. Even light cruisers have armor. So yes, high explosive can do superstructure damage and a bit of extra superstructure damage if it hits the superstructure, but for the most part, you want to have maximum armor penetration. So probably from a game this mechanical standpoint, you could just go full on 100% armor piecing. I find that a bit gamey. I accept that it is probably the correct way to go, and especially for things of main caliber weapons, 11 plus inches, and 7 plus. You only shoot those for penetration. So why would you have high explosive? So to keep it sort of grounded in real life, I am using 90-10 for the big guns, anything of 7 inches or greater, and everything else gets 80-20. But remember, 3-inch and DP secondaries and tertiary, they have 100% high explosive. So this, I think, is a good balance between what the game wants you to do and what you can say is reasonable for the time period and the doctrine that we have. The rest we can, of course, return to later. There are more doctrinal and ammunition choices. Not ammunition choices, but doctrinal choices. Espionage. We'll be spying a lot. But there is very little reason to spy right away, other than that you take a little while to ramp up. So you cannot go from none to high in at the drop of a hat. So you have to start at some points building up. And the bigger the nation's economy, the longer it takes to get more levels. Tensions are pretty low, so you don't need a lot of intel right away in terms of warfighting. There are no subs in the game, so you don't need intel for that. And perhaps most importantly, there are no techs to steal yet. Everyone starts with the same, except for one thing, and that is guns. A few nations have some starting guns that we do not, so that is worth considering. In terms of stealing tech, the UK is, of course, or Great Britain is, of course, one of the best nations to steal tech from. But we don't want them upset with us initially, because we will be building our ships at their shipyards for some years to come. So, post 1900-ish, then it's another matter entirely. So, start spying when tensions rise and when the first techs start to be researched. But probably tensions will start to rise, and we need to build up, so we will be espionaging at least a little bit relatively quickly. Tensions. The world is a peaceful place at the moment. That is good, because we are extremely weak and because our economy grows quickly. It's also very bad, because low tension means we get hit from time to time by budget reduction events, and we absolutely do not want those. So, ideally, we'd like for someone, China, to jump up to 7 into the yellow area and stay there. That is ideal. Then we won't drop, and it's not so high as to trigger too many of those events that threaten to further increase tension, because the game will definitely throw some additional events at you once tensions have reached high levels. Or not always, but frequently. So basically, I'm talking about brinkmanship. We want at least one nation, someone that we can handle if war breaks out, in the yellow. But we don't want tensions to go out of control and end up in a war before we are ready for it. That's not unique for this start. That's basically the entire game. So you need to balance your tensions, keep them up without getting into a war before you want one. Yeah. Officers, all my officers are unknown ability, and they are assigned automatically to ships. Whether or not you have auto assign on, it auto assigns your starting ship captains. I have to assign some rear admirals to my divisions. More about that soon. But other than that, there isn't really a lot to do here. We could do some promotions of the guys with the little thingies on, but again, we don't know if they are good or bad, so not really much of a point here. I guess we could set officers to auto-assign from now on, but at some point we have to turn it off, because the AI loves to promote unknowns, or bad ones, mostly unknowns. So even if you have a brilliant admiral sitting in your pool, or 6 brilliant admirals, it will definitely put someone with an unknown skill into a vacant admiral's position. And the same with rear admirals and captains and commanders. It's a weird design choice, or series of design choices, but it is what it is. And it's also top heavy. Even initially you start with more admirals and rear admirals than you do captains. Very strange design choice there as well. And if you are rapidly expanding your fleet, you might have to turn on auto between turns just to generate. You can run out of commanders, but if you set it to auto, it will generate additional commanders for you. Yeah, divisions. I need to assign them commanders, but other than that, I have sort of future-proofed it by making some divisions that can be filled with new builds. The roles are not super important at the moment. Just added in a few. And that concludes episode 1 of this Japan Super Large Plus playthrough. We have reviewed our starting position, and we are now ready to take a more detailed look at our first round of new builds and also on some refit design. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next episode.